Hello, welcome to this video. My name is Dave Adams. In this video, I'm going to be as thorough as possible. We're going to discuss the various CSS concepts and practice them. The first thing I want to talk about, or the first thing I want to touch on, is the font element or the text element. What I'm going to do is type some random text and go into my browser. Now, highlighting this and inspecting, right? Clicking and hitting inspect. We're going to, let me zoom into the, right? So we're focusing on this part. We have some default styling that is applied by the browser. We have display block, font size 2M. It has margin, top, at the top and at the bottom. And yeah, basically that's what I want to touch on. So what I want to say is the browser has default styling that is applied to every element. So to reset this, there's a selector that is used, and this is the asterisk symbol. And what this does is it affects every element. This asterisk symbol means that every element should be styled this way. So we're going to reset the margin to 0 and the padding to 0. And we're going to go back into the browser and check the values of the margin and padding, or the margin. And you can see that the margin at the top and the bottom has been reduced. What I'm going to do is to uncheck these styles. And this was how it was previously. Now, the shortcut to going into the inspector tool is F12. Now, when I go back and check them or reload the page, you can see that the space at the top and at the bottom has been eliminated. So this is very common. This is something that is done by a lot of developers when they're coding using HTML and CSS. Now, I want to touch on a few styling for text. I'm going to target the H1 using the element name. So we have font size. You can go with large, medium, or you can go with various units. The most common ones are 16. The most common ones are pixels, rem, and m. I'm just going to go with 16px. And that has been applied. I've zoomed into my browser so it may look bigger, but now it's 16px. If we highlight and inspect, you can see that the font size here is 16px. Now the browser also applies different font sizes for each element. So let me comment this out. And I'm just going to list H1 to H6 because we have 6 heading tags. I'm going to use the same Dave. Wow, my keyboard is just embarrassing me. And we have the same text, and we have them listed from H1 to H6, and you can see that they all have different font sizes. Going into our CSS, we can make all of these elements the same size. What we can do is comment this back, and we can select all these elements using a comma and some space. We can do H2, H3, H4, H5, H6. And this is how multiple elements can be selected because we want the same style to be applied to them. And now you can see that they are all the same size, even though they have different font elements. And that's the level of control CSS gives you. Now let's say we want to target only the H2 element. And we want the color to be red. You can see that the color red has been applied to only the H2 elements right here. Now with colors, you can go with the name of the color. You can go with the RGB code, or you can go with the hex code. Now there are various ways to get the hex code or RGB colors for various elements, but you can just type in the color, come into this control panel to get the exact color that you want. You can drag this first bar is for the opacity, how transparent you want the color to be. And this is the color slider. You go with the color that you want, yellow, green, blue, whichever color that you want. And you can also move this circle on the palette to get the shade of the color you want. So I'm just going to go with this light shade for H2. And you can see that it has been applied. Now the next thing I want to talk about is list. I'll still talk about it in a future video, but I just want to touch on it because we are dealing with CSS. Let me do about 3 list items. I'm just going to say CSS rocks so much. Now going into the browser, right? I expected the list to have, I'm going to comment the headings out. So I expected the list to have something we call list style in CSS. I'm targeting the UL and I'm saying list style. I want to target the list style property and say disks. I want to see if that works. And no, it does not work. I think there's something going on. Or rather, it should be the li. And still nothing. I feel like I did something wrong. Wow. Normally, URLs on ordered list and ordered list have list styles. It's still not showing. Wow. I'm going to try to deduce what is going on. So I found that the solution was taking out this style, the general styles that we declared in the beginning. I don't know why it's affecting how the list is displayed, but it really was. So for ordered list, we have the disk as a style. I'm going to go back to unordered list. And they still have the same style. Wow. Okay. No, that's because I targeted them and said the list style should be a disk. So I'm just going to comment this out. And unordered list have a disk, while ordered list have numbers as their default styling. I'm going to go back into the browser to confirm this. And you can see right here. But you can change these styles using the list style. Right. So there's this trick I use. If you're not sure about what to use, you can just leave it blank and Emmet will suggest a few styles that can be applied. So there are some that I've never tried before. So I'm going to go with Georgian for today and see how it looks. And this is what you get when you use Georgian. So that's for lists. Now, one other important thing I want to touch on is selecting by the states. I'm going to try to leave chapters in the video so you can skip and get to the parts that you need and want to use. So you're going to have a button. I want it to have some text within. I'm going to say CSS button. And I'm going to give it an ID of styled button. No, it can't be a space. It has to be one word. So it can be separated using a hyphen or an underscore. I'm going to target it by the ID with the pound sign or the hash sign. And it was styled hyphen button. Now, for that, I want to say the background by default should be blue. I'm going to hover over this and get a more attractive blue color. And I want to target the fonts within the button, and I want to make their color white because by default, their color is going to be black. And we should have that button right here. Now, as you can see, there's a border around it. I also want to touch on borders. So we have a compound property called border. So how this works is you specify the border width. You specify the type of border if you want it to be a solid one, and then the color. So I'd have to make this 1 just so we can see the effect it has. Solid white. Now when we go into the browser, oh, white was a bad color to use because it's going to blend in with the background. So I'm going to choose something that we can see. And there's this red border around it. So this is a compound style. And this is the 3 styles that are represented here. We're going to tackle them manually. We're going to do border width, which is right here. We're going to say 1px. We're going to do border color, which is was this red color. I'm just going to copy it just to demonstrate that the 3 styles have been represented with one compound style. And then we're going to do border style. So we have multiple border styles. If you want it to be dash, dotted, double, and solid, let's just go with double for now. And you can see that I'm going to zoom in even more. You can see that it has a double border. If we want to go back to solid, as I used in the first example, you can go with that. And this button is identical to, but it's so much that can be just represented with this one line. You can represent all these styles right here. Now, I'm still going to leave this. Now we want to target this button by states. So we're going to do, I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to terminate or close it with a closing tag. But to select the state, you need a colon. And we're going to do hover, which is right here. So when we hover over the button, we want the background color to change. So I'm going to make it a bit lighter when we hover over it. And now when we hover over it, you can see that the background color becomes lighter. And we're also going to target it by active. I think active stands for when the button is clicked. We want to make it, I think I should use distinct colors so the various states are well represented. When the button is active, we want it to change color. So now I just clicked on the button and you can see that it changes color. So I'm just going to hover over, I'm going to change the hover styling or the hover color to green, so we know what's going on. So what we've done here is the default color is blue. When we hover over it, it becomes green. And when we click on it, it becomes orange. And that's how selecting by state works. Use a colon and hover. Now, when you hover over the selector, Visual Studio Code helps you. So we have the elements with an ID of styled button, and it's showing you that that's exactly what you're trying to target. When you go back into the code, we have an element with an ID of styled button, which is represented right here. Now we have the state, and we've applied the various styling. Now, one thing I also want to point out is the fact that an ID cannot be used for two elements, whereas the same class can be used for two different elements. Now I've duplicated the button and it works, but it's not ideal. Sometimes what happens is if you have two elements with the same ID, whatever you want to apply is just apply to the first instance, which will be this button right here. And the next one is left there. I'm going to go into the browser too. I'm not seeing anything. Okay. Okay, now that I've explained these concepts, I want to go ahead and then create something beautiful with CSS. Also, I want to demonstrate what HTML looks like without CSS. So I'm going to comment this link out, and this is what it looks like without CSS. Now, if I comment it back, you can see that all the styles are applied, and it makes it beautiful. For the button, what I want to do is to apply some padding to make it look nicer. I'm going to right. This is a good one. So for padding, there are three ways of doing padding and margin. So we can either target all the four sides by doing 10px. So it starts at the top and goes clockwise. So top 10px, right, 20px, top bottom 10px, and left 20px. And that is applied right here. Now you can also do just two. So what this represents is the top and bottom, and this is going to represent right and left. So it's always going to start at the top, and the next one is going to be the right. So this represents top and bottom, and this represents right and left. Now, if you want the same units or the same measurements for all sides, you just use one, and it affects all sides. It's equal all around the element. Same for margin. I want the same space for the top and bottom and the left and right. So we're just going to do exactly that. And you can see that there's some great space between the two buttons. So on the left side, there's less space than the right side. That is because this button has its own margin ending somewhere here, and this one has its margin ending. So it just looks bigger, but it's equal on all sides. Yeah, I think I've touched on some basic concepts in CSS that are essential. As we go on, now that I've introduced CSS, as we go on, I'm just going to extensively style the various elements with CSS so you can grasp the concept of CSS and how it works with HTML. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, share, and turn on post notifications so you see every video I drop anytime I drop it.